Or the Gemara on the bottom of Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis, where it says, Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Nachmani. The first word in the line is Savri. So the Gemara here is discussing when you have beans that some of them took root in 1 year and other ones took root in the next year. Now the issue is you can't take maasros from the old year on the new year. So what do? So Rab Shimon Shizuri said you can put them all in one bowl and then you take maasros and you rely on the fact that the maasros you're taking is actually separating proportionally for the new year, for the old year. If you would put it in a bowl and you would have the ones for the new year in one part of the bowl and the ones for the old year in the other corner of the bowl, and you're going to take out maasros, so then what's going to happen is you might just take from beans from the old year, for example, and only from the old year to separate from all the other beans from the new year. So therefore what do you have to do? So the Gemara says, bila. You have to mix it all in together very well. And once it's mixed in well, so now we rely on the fact that whatever beans you took out for the maasros, you have proportionally the right amount for the new year and for the old year, and the maaser is good. That was Rab Shimon Shizuri. The Rabbanan say you can't do that. You can't mix it into a bowl and take it out that way. You're going to have to take separately for the new year, separately from the old year. Mixing does not help. So the Gemara now brings Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Nachmani, Amar Shmuel, Halacha k'Rabbi Yosi ben Kippur, she'amar mishum Rab Shimon Shizuri. As Shmuel said that we follow this halacha of Rab Shimon Shizuri, that you have beans, some took root the first year, some took root the next year, put them all in a bowl, mix it together, and you can take maasros together. Maskefla Rab Zayda, so Rab Zayda asked the question, did Shmuel say this? Shmuel clearly said, Lakoil ein bila. For anything, including these beans that we're speaking about here, we don't rely on mixing it together and taking the maasros from it that way. Only chutz miyayin v'shemen. Only wine or oil, which are liquids, they mix together. The liquids get totally mixed together. Anything else, like the beans, because it's not the liquid, it's a solid thing, and you mix it, it's possible that in one section there's beans from 1 year, and another section there's beans from another year. You can't rely on mixing it together. So Shmuel clearly does not hold of this halacha of Rab Shimon Shizuri that you can mix it together. And for the Gemara, ishtamite hadam Shmuel, Rab Zayda forgot this that Shmuel said, Hakoil hoylech achagemar peri. That Shmuel held that you don't even follow the time when it took root. When it comes to these beans, the time that the timing of the maaser for the new year and the old year is not when it took root. You look at when the fruit ripened, when the beans ripened. So therefore, if you have these petis over here, or these beans, part of them took root 1 year, part of them took root the other year, but they all ripened in the same year. So what Shmuel is saying is, you can put them all in the same bowl and take maasros from all of it together, because it ripened in the same year. So he doesn't hold like the reason of Rab Shimon Shizuri that you can mix, and mixing is okay. The point is not the mixing. The point is that the timing of what defines what's the new year and what's the old year is another timing. It's not the hashrosha. It's not the time when it took root. It's the time when it ripened. So in other words, he's paskening like Rab Shimon Shizuri, but not for the same reason that Rab Shimon Shizuri said. He's not relying on mixing it together. Just an interesting thing. Taisus points out over here that he doesn't know where's the source of the opinion of Shmuel. I mean, we had until here different shiurim regarding maasros, whether when you pick it, when it gets ripe a shlish, when it's a third ripe, or by the trees it's when it blossoms, chanota. And here Shmuel's coming up with another shiur, which is gemar peri, when it's basically ripe before you pick it from the tree. So Taisus says where's Shmuel's opinion? I don't see an answer in Taisus here.
This is for the tree, or this is for the
beans? Here we're talking about beans. It's talking about pola mitzri, all of these different kinds of beans and things. Yeah, but the lashon is hakoil. I'm not sure what exactly hakoil includes. Kopana, we had over here. If you look here in the Gemara that we just learned, we have over here 3 things that Shmuel said. Right. One thing Shmuel said is the halacha is like Rab Shimon Shizuri. Another thing Shmuel said, Lakoil ein bila chutz min hayayin v'nashemen. You can't ever rely on mixing from the new year and the old year together and then taking off the maasros that way. And the third point Shmuel said is Hakoil hoylech achagemar peri, that you follow the timing for the maasros when it becomes ripe. So the Gemara now will explain why it's necessary for him to say all of these three statements. Some of this is just spelling out the obvious, but we'll see. Some of it, the Gemara will explain that it would seem like it's not necessary for Shmuel to say all of this, and the Gemara will explain. And this is the reason why Shmuel had to say all these 3 things. If we just say that the halacha is like Rab Shimon Shizuri, that you could put it all into one bowl, then I would say, Mishum de Kasava Yesh Bila. He's paskening like Rab Shimon Shazuri for the same reason that Rab Shimon Shazuri himself said, that when you mix it, that itself is okay. That you can take the Yashan and the Chodesh together by mixing. Kamash Malan, that's why Shmuel clarifies in another place. Lakoil ein bila, that no, we don't rely on mixing, because he doesn't paskin like Rab Shimon Shazuri for his reason. If he would also say that we can't rely on mixing it together, so then hava minik rabbanon sfirale. So then I would think that he totally holds like the rabbanon, that you can't rely on mixing it together, and therefore if some of the beans took root in one year and some of the beans took root another year, you're going to have to figure out a way how to give ma'aser separately for them, and there's no way of mixing it in the bowl. So therefore, Kamash Malan halacha Rab Shimon Shazuri. That's why he has to tell me that halacha is like Rab Shimon Shazuri, that you could mix it into one bowl. Not because mixing helps, but because you don't follow the time when it took root. The time when you take the ma'aser is when it became ripe, and it all became ripe in the same year. If Shmuel would say these 2 points, that the halacha is like Rab Shimon Shazuri, and he would also say that there's no bila, that you can't rely on mixing, so then I would think havamina kashya de Shmuel ad Shmuel. That would seem to be a contradiction in what Shmuel said, and that was exactly what Rab Zayda asked. So Kamash Malan, that's why Shmuel said a third point, Hakail Hoylech Acha Gemar Peri, that you always follow the Gemar Peri. So from this we understand that he paskined like Rab Shimon Shazuri, but not for the same reason that Rab Shimon Shazuri said. If he would tell us this halacha that you always follow Gemar Peri, so hava mineh, so then I would think, what does Hakail Hoylech Acha Gemar Peri mean? Oh, so here the Gemara actually clarifies this. What does the Hakail go on? So I would think, because he said Hakail, that everything goes with the Gemar Peri, afilu tvua zeisim nami, that this refers even to grain, or even to grapes, or olives, which are chayiv and ma'aser min haTorah. And we had before a pasuk. The pasuk says that regarding those, you go after a third, when it became a third ripe. But if Shmuel would simply say, Hakail Hoylech Acha Gemar Peri, I would think Hakail goes on everything. So Kamash Malan, therefore Shmuel also said, halacha Rab Shimon Shazuri, that the halacha is like Rab Shimon Shazuri. So from what do I understand from this? B'mai the polig, that when he's saying that you go Acha Gemar Peri, he's only talking about the beans. Regarding this case of the beans that Rab Shimon Shazuri and Rabbanon were arguing about, whether you can put it into one bowl or not. So over there he's saying you can put it into one bowl because regarding those things, you go after Gemar Peri. But not regarding those things that are chayiv and ma'aser min haTorah. Over there we had a pasuk that you go after the shlish when it's a third ripe, not when it's fully ripe. Sagt the Gemara, but v'leshmeinon hani tarti. But why isn't it enough for Shmuel to come and say these 2 points, which is that the halacha is like Rab Shimon Shazuri, and then also the point that you follow Gemar Peri? Wouldn't that teach me everything? So Rashi explains, why would that teach me everything? Because if he's saying the halacha is like Rab Shimon Shazuri, and then he's clarifying, why am I paskening like Rab Shimon Shazuri? Not because of his reason that mixture helps, but I'm paskening like him because I follow when the fruit is fully ripe. So then you would understand that he doesn't hold of the reasoning of Rab Shimon Shazuri that mixing helps. Why does he have to clearly say that mixing does not help? That's extra, it's self-understood. Why did he have to spell out clearly that for everything, mixing 2 things from 2 different years doesn't help? One second, let me just see the answer over here. And for the Gemara, the reason why he's saying it is for the second part of his statement. The leyayin v'shemen yeshpila. He's coming to say that for wine and for oil, over there, mixing does help. For the etzem point for Shmuel to say that mixing does not help, that's already self-understood from this that he says that he's only paskening like Rab Shimon Shazuri, but not for his reason. He has his own reason. In other words, he does not agree to the point of Rab Shimon Shazuri that mixing helps. So that's already self-understood. He's only adding that mixing does not help because he wants to tell you that regarding liquids like wine and oil, mixing does help. So that's why you have to say that third statement as well.
Shmuel and Shimon Shazuri are saying different things, really.
Correct.
Because this one's saying
mixing.
Shmuel, you have to mix it, and Shmuel saying you don't have to mix it.
No, yet you still you still
that as long as it didn't.
But when
if it didn't grow.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. So it's not mamish necessary to mix it. Okay, l'chayri, you're right. But when you take maasros, you're supposed to take it all in the same keli. So I don't know if you have to mamish mix it, like Rab Shimon Shazuri is saying. Right, you have a good point. You don't have to mamish mix it because it's not an issue of Yashan and Chodesh. It's all from the same year. But it does have to be in the same keli. That's how you take meiser. It's all in the same keli. Yeah. Tanya. Yeah, ich verstehe. It's a good point you're saying. Tanya, Rabbi Yosi Aglili said, and here the Gemara is going back to the maestris that we had before that are midrabanan. The maestris of trees, of all fruit trees, is all midrabanan. And also the maestris of the vegetables is also midrabanan. And what was the shiur we said before? By trees, it's chanata, you go after the time that it blossomed. And by the vegetables, you go by the lekita, when you picked it. So here the Gemara is going to bring an asmachta from a pasuk, even though it's not menatayre, but it's going to bring this asmachta. What does it say over there by the pasuk by Sukkis? Ba'aspacha migarnacha umiyikvecha. When you gather from your threshing floor, that's the grain, or from the yikvecha, which is the wine press. So the Gemara learns out like as follows. Ma goyrim v'yekev. We're comparing, when the pasuk said ba'aspacha, according to this drasha, ba'aspacha refers when you gather any of your produce, from any of your trees or any of your vegetables, so it refers to everything else. And I'm comparing everything else to migarnacha and yikvecha. That's going to be the source to create the rule of when the timing for the maestris is. So we compare as follows. Ma goyrim v'yekev, just like when it comes to the grain, the threshing floor, and v'yekev, and the wine press. So miyuchadin, they are both unique in the fact, shegedelim al meishana she'avra, that they grow on the water from the past year. What does that mean? It grows with rainwater. It doesn't. In other words, as we learned before, once it's already ripe, a third, so then it's chayiv and maestris then, because a third is already b'diavad. You can cut it then, and you could use it. You could eat it at that point, and therefore, if a third of it became ripe in the previous year, and 2/3 became ripe in the next year, so we learned that already from the pasuk that because a third of it became ripe in the previous year, we follow the rainwater that was provided for it, and it became a third ripe in the previous year. And also the maestris goes on the previous year, that it became ripe a third. So afkol, so too, when it comes to the other things that are not menatayra, when it comes to the fruit trees and when it comes to the vegetables, anything that grows on the water from the previous year. Anything that grows on the water from the previous year, misasrin l'shana sha'avra. So there, the maestris goes on the previous year. Yatsi yerakais, and therefore that excludes vegetables. Shagedelim almei shana haba. They grow on the water from the year to come. What does this mean? When it comes to the yerakais, so you constantly are watering them. Yirakais is not something that relies on the water that it has in the beginning. You're constantly watering them all the way till the last second when you cut it off. And even when you cut off the vegetables, what happens after you cut off the vegetables? You continue watering them because it continues growing even more. More vegetables come. So therefore, when it comes to the Yirakais, because it continues growing and it continues ripening more and more, so therefore over here you follow the maestris of this year when you actually picked it. Whereas when it comes to the trees, they already had the water from it in the beginning of the season, and then later it just grows on its own and it becomes ripe and you take it off the tree and it doesn't continue growing anymore. So therefore by the trees the meister goes according to the previous year. This is Rabbi Yosi Aglili. Okay, so we're comparing the trees and the vegetables to the maestris menatayre of Goyrim v'Yakev, even though it's not exactly the same, but we're sort of comparing it. I mean, it's not the same because over there the maestris goes according to a third, right? When it's a third ripe, and that's what shana she'avra means there. The previous year was a third ripe, and over here when it comes to the trees, you don't even have to wait until it's a third ripe. By the trees, you go with chanata as soon as it blossoms. Okay, and by the vegetables, it's only when it's picked from the tree. But it's a similar concept. Whether we go with the shana she'avra or the shana haba. Rabbi Kiva has a very similar drasha. Rabbi Kiva, when the pasuk says ba'aspacha migarnacha umiyikvecha, so what do you learn from this pasuk? Again, we compare all of aspacha, all of the things that you gather, whether the trees or the vegetables, you compare it to garnacha and yikvecha. Ma goyrim v'yakev miyuchadin shegedelim al roiv mayim. Just like when it comes to goyrim v'yakev, the grain and the wines, the vines. So what's unique about them? They grow on roiv mayim. Roiv mayim refers to rainwater. Rashi says the reason why rainwater is called roiv mayim is because most things grow with rainwater. So those grow only, they rely just on rainwater. They don't need to be watered other than the rain. Umis asrin l'shana she'avra. And their meiser also goes with the previous year. If it became ripe a third in the previous year, that's what establishes its meiser. Av kol shegedelim al roiv mayim. The same is also anything that relies just on rainwater. Misasel l'shana shavra. So then the meiser of that also goes with the previous year, and that's the trees. The trees, they just need rainwater. They don't need to be watered constantly. So they rely on the rainwater, and then from the time of Chanukah, it grows on its own already, and therefore the meiser of it goes for the previous year from the time of Chanukah. Yatsu yerakais. So this excludes the yerakais, the vegetables, shegedelim al kol mayim. They grow constantly with all kinds of water, not just rainwater. You have to draw water, or you have to bring water and keep on watering it every single day. So then, because you're constantly watering it to the very last day, so therefore the meiser goes to the future year. So it seems like Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva are saying a very, very similar point. What's the difference in the way they said the drasha? So the Gemara now explains. My beinayu, what's the difference between them? Amar Rabbi Vo says the difference would be the following case. B'tsalem haserisin, these onions that are called serisin. The reason why they're called serisin is because they're very small. They don't grow big. They don't ripen properly. That's why they're called serisin, small. Upula mitzri, or we had before in the Gemara these beans, these mitzri beans, that over here the Gemara is talking about these beans that are not being eaten as beans, because then the maestris is from the time when it takes root, but these beans also have leaves in it and you eat it as a vegetable. So what's the story with these betzalim and this pula mitzri? Here there'll be a difference between Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva. And the Gemara brings a Mishnah and a very specific case where there'll be a nafkamina. That's now we learned in the Mishnah. Betzalim aserisin. When you have these little onions, upula mitzri, and these beans, shemana me'amayim shloishim yom lefnei Rosh Hashanah. So usually, like all vegetables, you keep on watering them every day in order for them to grow. But over here, these are small and they can actually be there and become ripe. They don't become fully ripe, but even if you don't water it until the end, and for 30 days he did not water them, and it's still you can still cut it off. So he did not water them for 30 days before Rosh Hashanah. So if so, says the Mishnah, misasrim l'shavar. Since you didn't water it for the last 30 days before Rosh Hashanah, so it's relying on the water from the previous year. You didn't water it all the way till the end when you cut it, so it goes in the previous year. And also mutarim b'shviyas. If that Rosh Hashanah was shmita, so it's going to be mutter to use in shmita because it's connected to the previous year. V'im lav, but if not, if you continued giving it water all the way up to when you picked it in shmita right after Rosh Hashanah, so then asurim b'shviyas. It's going to be aser in shmita or misasrin l'shana haba, and the meiser goes with the previous year. So over here, Rashi explains. There's two pshatim in Rashi. I'll explain the first pshat in Rashi, that the difference between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi Aglili is this case. According to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, the fact that you stopped giving the water from the previous year, already 30 days you weren't giving water, so therefore Rabbi Yossi Aglili would agree to what it says in this Mishnah. The only reason why you go by the vegetables to the time when you pick it is because you actually are watering it all the way till the end. And by the trees, you don't water it till the end. It relies on rainwater. So therefore you go according to the mice of the previous year. But what happens if you have vegetables that you did stop giving it water until the very end? There's 30 days you didn't give it water, so then the mice is going to go like the previous year. That's Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Rabbi Akiva, on the other hand, Rabbi Akiva says you have to look at the nature, the regular nature that it has. The nature is trees needs only rainwater, and vegetable needs all kinds of water. That's the nature of the vegetables and the trees. Whether you stop giving it the water 30 days early, that's not going to change. It's whether it's g'delam al roiv mayim or kol mayim. So since the nature of these bitzalim and these pula mitzri is that it's g'delam al kol mayim, even if you didn't water it till the very end, it doesn't matter. This is the nature of this, that it usually needs kol mayim, and therefore the meister is still going to be to the shana haba. So Rabbi Akiva disagrees with the point that it says in this Mishnah over here. That's the first pshat. And actually there's another pshat. Okay, let's go back to the Gemara. Going back to the Mishnah, it said Be'echad b'Shvat Rosh Hashanah le'ilan. That in Rosh Hashanah for the trees is the first day of Shvat. That was Rabbi Shammai, and Beis Hillel said that it's Chamishasa b'Shvat. My time, why Shvat? Amar Rabbi Loza, Amar Rabbi Yishia, Hoyel v'Yatzu Roiv Gishmei Shana, because the tree already got most of the rain that it needs from the rain season in the winter. And then he added, Va'adayin roiv tkufa mibachutz. However, most of the tkufa of Tevis, which is the winter, still is outside. In other words, has not come in yet. When's the tkufa of Tevis? The tkufa of Tevis is about Tevis, Shvat, and Adar, until about the beginning of Nisan. Sometime in the beginning of Tevis starts Tkufa's Tevis, all the way up to Nisan. So when you come to the Shchai Shvat, or even Tezvav Shvat, still most of the Tkufa of Tevis is usually still here. Okay, so the Gemara asks, wait a minute, my Kama, what is Rabbi Ishi saying? He seems to be contradicting himself. He starts off saying that most of the rain season is already over, meaning that the tree already got most of its rain, and therefore the tree now has what it needs to grow for this year. So therefore that's the cutoff date of Rosh Hashanah Shvat. After that, that's already for the next year. But right afterwards he says, no, most of the winter season is still here, B'chlav. So why is he saying that? So the Gemara explains, you have to sort of read it in the opposite way. What he was saying was, even though most of the winter has not passed yet, it's still coming, but nevertheless, but since most of the rain season that the tree needs from the rain is already here, so therefore the tree has already all its rain it needs, and then there's the sraf inside the tree, the moisture inside the tree that it grows from, so it's already completed. The tree already has the rain from this year that it needs, so therefore from Rosh Hashanah Shvat going forward, it's already considered to be a new year. There's the famous, okay, let's go weiter, we'll mention it later. Ton Rabbanon, we learned in Abraisa as follows. Maise Rabbi Akiva sheliket esrig bechad b'shvat. There was a story with Rabbi Akiva, so he picked the esrig from the tree, and when was it? It was Rosh Hashanah Shvat. And v'noig by shnei yisurim. And he gave Meiser for the previous year, and also for the following year. It was Rosh Hashanah Shvat, and so Rashi says, let's say it was the second year going into the third year. So the second year you have to give Meiser Sheni, and the third year you have to give Meiser Ani. So he gave Meiser for the second year, and he gave Meiser for the third year. He gave two Meisers. So the Gemara explains, there's two opinions over here, what Rabbi Akiva was doing. One opinion is, Echad Kedivrei Beis Shammai, ve'echad Kedivrei Beis Hillel. He was giving Meiser like Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai says Rosh Hashanah Shvat, so it's already the new year. And one is like Beis Hillel, and he was giving according to Beis Hillel that Rosh Hashanah Shvat is still the previous year. It's before Chamisha Asar B'Shvat. Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda says, no, when he was giving the two Meisres, it's not based on Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Loi minig Beis Shammai Beis Hillel nogba. It's not because he was following both opinions of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, ela minig Rabbi Gamliel v'Rabbi Eliezer nogba. Rather, he was giving two Meisres because he was following the two opinions of Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Eliezer. So think about this. What happened over here? He picked the esrik from the tree on Rosh Hashanah Shvat, lekita. But by trees, don't we follow Chanata? Don't we go at the time when it began growing, when it began blossoming? So over here, he picked it on Rosh Hashanah Shvat, and he was giving Meisters for 2 years. So the Gemara explains that the esrik tree is different than regular trees, according to one opinion. The Tanan, so we learned in the Mishnah, esrik shavale ilon begimel drachim. A tree, an esrik tree that is, has the halacha like all trees regarding 3 different halachas. Uleyerek b'derech echad. But we compare an esrik tree to vegetables regarding one halacha. And the Bryce explains, or the Mishnah explains, Shaval ilam gimel drachim. An esrik tree is like all trees in 3 ways. That's la'arla, or la'revai, or la'shvius. Just like all trees, it has the halacha of arla, and then the halacha of revai, and also the halachas of shmita. When it comes to shmita, so it's going to follow all other trees, which is that you go after the chanata, the time when it blossomed. But then, a esrik tree is compared to a vegetable when it comes to the halacha of meiser, shebishas lekitasa isurai, that you follow the time of meisres for the time when it's picked. Divrei Rabbi Gamliel. That's the opinion of Rabbi Gamliel, that the meisres of the esrik tree is different than all trees. The Gemara in Kiddushin explains that the reason is connected to what we said before, because the esrik tree is different than all kinds of trees. It grows not only on rainwater. An esrik tree has to be watered constantly. We said before that the reason for the difference between the vegetables and the fruits is whether it relies just on rainwater or all water. An esrik tree is a very weak tree, and it needs rainwater, and not only rainwater, it needs water constantly. So therefore, regarding meiser, it's compared to vegetables that you go after when it's picked. That's Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Eliezer says, esrik shaveli ilon l'chol davar. No, an esrik tree is just like a regular tree for everything, even for the meisres, and you go after when it began growing, when it began blossoming. So that was the 2 opinions that Rabbi Akiva was doing. It was Rosh Hashanah Shvat. So if you go after the lekita, so he picked it in the new year, because it's already Rosh Hashanah Shvat. And if you go after the Chanata, so it began blossoming in the previous year. The Gemara is soon going to ask, but it comes out here that he's basically following Beis Shammai though. He's following the two opinions of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Gamliel regarding the picking, the Lakita and the Chanata. But it's Rosh Chodesh Shvat. Rosh Chodesh Shvat is Beis Shammai. So the Gemara will address that soon. Okay, so this is the story of the Braisa. But now the Gemara has another question. Is this something that you're supposed to do? You could just take the Chumrah of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel? The Gemara is asking this question that's going on the Tanakama here, that he did the Chumrah of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Could you take two Chumras? Vatanya, we learned in the Braisa, La'olam halacha k'divrei Beis Hillel. The halacha is always like Beis Hillel. If you want to do like Beis Shammai, you can go ahead and do like Beis Shammai. K'divrei Beis Hillel, or if you're going to do like Beis Hillel, you can do like Beis Hillel. However, mikule Beis Shammai u mikule Beis Hillel, if a person is going to come and say, I'm going to choose those places where Beis Shammai was lenient and those places where Beis Hillel was lenient. He takes only the kulas. Or, he's a very frum. Umechumre Beis Shammai umechumre Beis Hillel. He's always going to take the chumre of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. You can't do that. I'm sorry, I missed one word. Rasha. If you take all the kulas, so then you're a Rasha. Okay. If you take mechumre Beis Shammai and mechumre Beis Hillel, all of akasav aimer, regarding such an individual, he thinks he's extra from. The pasuk says, no, vaksil b'choisha chaylech, that a fool goes in darkness. Ela iki Beis Shammai b'kuleyen u'b'chumreyen. If you're following Beis Shammai, you have to follow him for the kula and for the chumra. And iki Beis Hillel, if you're following Beis Hillel, b'kuleyen u'b'chumreyen. So you have to follow Beis Hillel both for the kula and for the chumra. So Rashi clarifies what this Braisa here means. Rashi says that when the Braisa says you can't just take the kulas of Beis Hillel and the kulas of Beis Shammai, you can't choose all the kulas or all the chumras. You have to decide which opinion you're going to take. It's only in a case where the kula that you're choosing of Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai are a contradiction to one another. If it's a kula of one point, of one thing that they argue about, and from this one point that they argue about, there could be an application in one case that's going to be a chumrah, and an application in another case where it's going to be a chumrah. But the application is coming from one point, and it's a contradiction. You got to pick and choose. You can't take a kula and a chumrah from the same point and apply it in one place, la kula or la chumrah. But however, Rashi says, how about if a person says regarding one subject, I follow Beis Shammai's opinion. Regarding another subject, I follow Beis Hillel's opinion. Even though one is a kula and one is a chumrah, it doesn't matter. It's only if the kula and the chumrah, or you're choosing two kulas, that are a contradiction to each other, or you're choosing two chumras that are a contradiction to each other. So the Gemara's question over here, Rabbi Akiva was doing two things that are a contradiction to each other. Either you go after the Lakita of 1 year, or you go after the Lakita of another year. Either the Rosh Hashanah is Rosh Chodesh Shvat, or the Rosh Hashanah is Chamisha Asar B'Shvat. You have to pick and choose. You have to decide which one. You can't do both. It's a contradiction. So the Gemara answers, no, it's not a contradiction, because he Bichlal had a suffix who you paskin like. The Gemara says that over here, Rabbi Akiva Gemara istapikle. The halacha of what he learned, of what the tradition of what he got, that was for him a suffix. V'lo yada, and he didn't know what the halacha is, because he didn't know I Beis Hillel be'echad b'Shvat, I b'Tezvav b'Shvat. He wasn't sure what Beis Hillel's opinion was. He didn't know if Beis Hillel is the one that says that the Rosh Hashanah is Rosh Chodesh Shvat, or maybe Beis Hillel is the one that says that the Rosh Hashanah is Chamisha Asar b'Shvat. So because he was unsure what Beis Hillel's opinion is, that's why he was machmer for both. If you know what both opinions are, you can't choose this and this, two things that are a contradiction to each other. But he didn't know what Beis Hillel's opinion is. The next thing it said in the Braisa before was Rabbi Yosi by Yehuda Omer loy minig Beis Shammai Beis Hillel nogba, that when he was machmer to give maisris for 2 years, it's not because he had a suffix in the opinion of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, el minig Rabbi Gamliel v'Rabbi Eliezer nogba. Rather, he had a suffix whether you treat the esrog like a vegetable, like the opinion of Rabbi Gamliel, or like the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, that it's like a regular tree. So therefore, on Rosh Chodesh Shvat, he picked it on Rosh Chodesh Shvat, so he wasn't sure if you go after the Lakita, so therefore it's already picked in the new year, or you go after the Chanata, and the Chanata happened in the previous year. That was the reason why he gave for 2 years. So the Gemara asks on this, Be'echad b'Shvat, but it says that this was on Rosh Chodesh Shvat, Ke Beis Shammai noeg ba? So he went according to Beis Shammai. Why is Rabbi Akiva passing like Beis Shammai? We always passing like Beis Hillel. So the Gemara gives two answers. You know what this is really speaking about? be'esrik shechontu peiroisav koidim tezvav. The Iddoch Shvat. Really, we're speaking about an esrig that's on the tree for a very long time. It's on the tree already for more than a year, or maybe close to more than a year. It began blossoming before the previous Tezvav Shvat of the previous year. And therefore, so according to Beis Hillel, this esrig already belongs to the previous year before the Tezvav Shvat of the past year. When we looked in the Braise was talking about Echad B'Shvat this year, right now, that he picked it now on Echad B'Shvat. So the Gemara says, no. This esrig from Echad B'Shvat, when did it begin growing? It began growing before Tezvav B'Shvat of the previous year. So now the shaila is, do you go after the Chanata of that previous year? For example, now we're in Tavshin Pei Beis. So this esrig began growing before Tezvav Shvat of Tavshin Pei Aleph. So now either you go after the Chanata of Tavshin Pei, or you go after the Lakita, which is in Tavshin Pei Aleph, because it's still the Chodesh Shvat of Tavshin Pei Beis, and it's before Chamisha Asa B'Shvat of Tavshin Pei Beis. And we're following Beis Hillel's opinion, that you go after Chamisha Asa B'Shvat. So the Gemara says, "Ubedinu afilu kaidim l'chein," and therefore, really, this story could have even been said about him picking this esrig before the Chodesh Shvat. There's no reason for it to say the Chodesh Shvat. It could have been in Kislev, Tevis, or any other time. The story was that he picked the esrig on the Chodesh Shvat. But really, the question over here is not about the Chodesh Shvat. We're not following Beis Shammai's opinion. The question is about the Chamish Asa B'Shvat of the previous year. Do you go after the Chanata of that Chamish Asa B'Shvat of the previous year, or do you go after the Lakita, which is after the Chamish Asa B'Shvat of the previous year, which happened to have been in the Chodesh Shvat? It could have been in any other time. That's one shot. Ravina says, Kroich v'tani. You have to include another point here that did not say clearly in the Braise. When Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda argues with the Tanakama, you have to add another point. That he says, Loi be'echad b'shvat haya. This story with Rabbi Akiva did not take place on a Chodesh Shvat like the Tanakama said. Ela tezvav b'shvat haya. The story took place on Chamisha Asa b'Shvat. That's the first point that Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda is saying. Right? The Tanakama was saying that he had a suffix what Beis Hillel's opinion is, and therefore he said the story took place on a Chodesh Shvat. Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda is saying no, it did not take place on a Chodesh Shvat. It took place on Chamisha Asa b'Shvat. That's the first point. And the second point, v'lo nog minig Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. Again, v'lo minig Beis Shammai Beis Hillel nog ba, and the reason why it took Mises for 2 years is not because he had a suffix whether you should paskin like Beis Shammai or Beis Hillel, or he didn't know what Beis Hillel's opinion is. Ela minig Rabbi Gamliel v'Rabbi Eliezer nog ba. Rather, he had a suffix when it comes to the esrik tree, whether it's compared to all trees and you follow the chanata, or it's like a vegetable and you follow the and you follow the lakita. So he was saying two different points.